This prankster threw a water balloon at a royal guard, expecting silence and no reaction. But security wasted no time. What followed was a swift and humiliating takedown the crowd will never forget. Here's how it happened. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the royal guards that you won't want to miss. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Buckingham Palace's courtyard as guard Thomas Harrison maintained his post, his scarlet tunic a vibrant contrast against the ancient stonework. Despite the August heat, his posture remained perfect. Each button polished to a mirror shine, every crease in his uniform knife-sharp, the result of hours of meticulous preparation before dawn. A ripple of laughter broke through the usual murmur of tourists, drawing curious glances toward the palace gates. Through the crowd emerged a figure that seemed jarringly out of place against the dignified backdrop. A young man in a garishly bright clown costume, complete with oversized shoes and a red rubber nose. His face was painted in exaggerated makeup, but his eyes held a calculating gleam that didn't quite match his jovial appearance. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard with practiced showmanship. "The amazing Joey the Jester has arrived to brighten up this stuffy old place." He executed an exaggerated bow, his rainbow wig flopping forward comically. A few children giggled, pointing excitedly as their parents watched with mixed expressions. Behind Joey trailed a man with a professional camera, his equipment marking him as more than just another tourist. Mike Chen had worked with Joey for months, documenting his performances with the detached professionalism of someone who preferred to stay behind the lens. Today, his camera focused not just on Joey, but on Guard Harrison's stoic figure, the obvious target of whatever spectacle was about to unfold. "Look at this place," Joey proclaimed, skipping between groups of tourists. "All these guards standing around like statues. Don't you think they could use a little entertainment?" He pulled a balloon animal from his oversized pocket, twisting it into shape with flourishing gestures. A small girl clapped delightedly as he presented her with a balloon dog, her mother's cautious smile not quite reaching her eyes. Guard Harrison remained motionless, but his peripheral vision tracked Joey's movements with the instinct of a soldier who'd learned to identify threats, no matter how colourfully they dressed. The afternoon sun glinted off his ceremonial rifle as Joey drew closer, each squeaking step of his oversized shoes bringing him nearer to crossing an invisible line. A group of elderly tourists, their matching tour group badges, identifying them as visiting from Canada, exchanged knowing glances. One of them, his blazer bearing a veteran's pin, watched Joey's approach with the quiet concern of someone who recognized the difference between harmless entertainment and deliberate provocation. "Come on, everyone," Joey called out, his voice carrying a hint of challenge beneath its theatrical cheer. "Who wants to see if we can make these guards actually show some personality?" His hand disappeared into another pocket, and something about his grin suggested this was just the opening act of a show that would test more than just a guard's legendary composure. The crowd's reaction began to split, some drawn in by the promise of entertainment, others sensing the undercurrent of disrespect in Joey's approach. As he positioned himself near Guard Harrison, his painted smile took on an edge that suggested this performance would push boundaries far beyond simple circus tricks. "You know what always confused me," Joey announced to his growing audience, his voice carrying the practiced timing of a street performer. "These guards are supposed to protect the palace, right?" He mimed, looking through an enormous imaginary telescope, focusing it on Harrison's bearskin cap. "But how can they see anything through these giant fuzzy hats?" More laughter rippled through the crowd, though some of the older tourists began to drift away, recognizing the signs of approaching trouble. Mike adjusted his camera angle, capturing both Joey's performance and the guard's unwavering stance, his lens focusing on the growing contrast between chaos and discipline. "Maybe he's sleeping under there," Joey suggested, creeping closer with exaggerated tiptoe steps. Should we check? He produced a feather from his sleeve, its bright pink colour jarring against the palace's dignified backdrop. A mother quickly ushered her children back as Joey waved the feather near Harrison's face, never quite making contact, but coming close enough to violate the guard's personal space. "Sir," a middle-aged man in the crowd spoke up, his Australian accent carrying a note of concern, "perhaps that's not appropriate." His teenage sons had lowered their phones, their earlier amusement fading as they sensed the shift in atmosphere. Joey turned to the man with an exaggerated pout. "Not appropriate, but we're just having some fun." He pulled a string of handkerchiefs from his sleeve, letting them flutter deliberately close to Harrison's face. "See? Nothing but good, clean entertainment." The guard remained motionless, but those who looked closely might have noticed a subtle tension in his jaw. His eyes, fixed forward with practiced discipline, held the patience of a soldier who had faced far worse than clown antics, but also the awareness that this situation was escalating beyond simple tourist foolishness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Joey continued, his voice taking on a ringmaster's flourish, "what we have here is a rare specimen. The completely unmovable guard." He began circling Harrison like a carnival barker, showing off an exhibit. Notice the perfect posture, the unwavering stare, the complete lack of any human reaction. Mike had positioned himself strategically, his camera capturing every moment. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes darted occasionally toward the palace gates, as if calculating escape routes. He'd filmed enough of Joey's performances to recognize when things were about to cross a line. A group of British school children on a field trip watched wide-eyed as their teacher tried to hurry them past. "But miss," one boy protested, "I want to see what happens." The teacher's response was firm. "Some things aren't meant to be entertainment." Joey's tricks grew bolder. He produced a rubber chicken, dangling it mere inches from Harrison's face. The crowd's laughter had become more uncertain, tinged with the nervous energy of people witnessing something approaching a tipping point. A few tourists had begun recording on their phones, though whether they were hoping to capture comedy or chaos remained unclear. "He's got to break eventually," Joey declared, his painted smile taking on a challenging edge. "Everyone has a breaking point, right?" He reached into his costume's oversized pocket, rustling around with theatrical mystery. "Maybe we just haven't found the right trick yet." An elderly couple wearing matching Royal Marines Veterans Association pins had stopped to observe. The woman touched her husband's arm as he straightened instinctively, years of military service recognizing the preliminaries of confrontation. "That boy's playing a dangerous game," she murmured, but they didn't move away. Instead, they positioned themselves where they could clearly see both the guard and the growing crowd, their presence adding a subtle weight to the scene. Joey's hand emerged from his pocket, still hidden in a closed fist. His painted face had taken on an expression that didn't quite match his cheerful costume. Something more calculating, more determined. The afternoon sun cast his shadow across the courtyard stones, stretching it out like a warning of what was to come. "Now," he announced, his voice carrying a hint of something harder beneath its theatrical veneer, "let's see what it takes to get a real reaction from our stone-faced friend here." "For my next trick," Joey announced, reaching into his polka-dotted vest with theatrical flourish, "we'll explore the ancient and noble art of—" He paused dramatically, eyes scanning the crowd for maximum effect. "Honking the royal nose!" The small red ball emerged between his fingers, its rubber surface gleaming in the afternoon sun. When he squeezed it, the sharp squeak cut through the air like a knife, the sound seeming almost sacrilegious against the palace's centuries-old dignity. Children who had been giggling at his earlier antics now pressed closer to their parents' legs, instinctively sensing the shift in atmosphere. Something had changed in Joey's bearing. The playful mask had slipped just enough to reveal something darker underneath, a predatory gleam that even the youngest ones could recognize. His painted smile remained fixed, but it no longer reached his eyes, which had taken on a calculating hardness that belied his colourful costume. Mike adjusted his camera settings with practiced precision, his lens focusing tighter on the unfolding scene. He'd filmed enough of Joey's performances to recognise the signs of escalation, to know when to capture the moment that could turn from entertainment to incident in the blink of an eye. The afternoon sun caught his camera's lens, sending a brief flash across Harrison's immobile face. "Come on, folks!" Joey addressed the crowd, his fingers dancing the squeaky ball through elaborate patterns, making it disappear and reappear between his knuckles. "Don't tell me you've never wondered what would happen. All that training, all that discipline." He gestured theatrically at Harrison's immobile form, his oversized sleeve nearly brushing the guard's shoulder. "Just to stand here like expensive garden statues. I mean, what's the point? Tax dollars at work, ladies and gentlemen, paying for the world's most overdressed mannequins." The veteran couple stood their ground, their presence like an anchor of dignity in the increasingly turbulent atmosphere. The husband's weathered hand moved to his campaign medals with the unconscious gesture of a man who'd earned every piece of metal pinned to his chest. His fingers traced the ribbons, each touch seeming to connect him to memories of service, sacrifice, and the true meaning of the uniform Joey was mockingly approaching. "Young man," he called out, his voice carrying decades of command, the kind of authority that needed no volume to demand attention. "That uniform deserves respect. It's not a prop for your entertainment." Joey spun toward the voice, his painted features contorting into something that barely maintained its facade of joviality. The red ball danced faster between his fingers, its movements becoming almost aggressive. "Respect?" His voice dripped with exaggerated incredulity. "For what? Standing still, looking pretty for the tourists." He swaggered back toward Harrison, the squeaky ball now held out like a weapon, his movements losing their theatrical grace and taking on a more deliberate menace. "Let's test that famous discipline everyone talks about. Honk, honk!" The words came out sing-song, but there was an edge beneath them, sharp as a razor wrapped in cotton candy. A nearby tour guide had frozen mid-gesture, her memorized speech about palace history dying on her lips as she watched the scene unfold. A group of American tourists, cameras still half raised, seemed to sense the tension crackling in the air. "Perhaps we should move along," she suggested, her practiced professional tone wavering slightly. "The staterooms are particularly lovely this time of day." But nobody moved. The atmosphere had become charged with the kind of electricity that roots feet to the ground, that transforms casual observers into unwilling witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. "Look at that focus, ladies and gentlemen!" Joey's voice rose, the ball now hovering mere inches from Harrison's face. His movements had lost all pretense of performance, becoming increasingly erratic and aggressive. "Not even a blink! I bet he's screaming inside, though, right, folks?" He turned to the crowd with an exaggerated wink that looked more like a threat than a gesture of complicity. "What do you think? Is he imagining all the ways he could drop me if he wasn't playing statue, all that combat training, all those weapons?" He danced back, then forward again, each movement more provocative than the last. "But he can't do anything, can he? Because he's just a tourist attraction now." Harrison's eyes remained locked forward, focused on that distant point that all guards are trained to watch. But something had shifted in his bearing, a subtle change that only those with military experience might recognize. It wasn't tension exactly, nor was it preparation for movement. Rather, it was the kind of deadly calm that combat veterans know precedes justified action. His ceremonial rifle, held in white-gloved hands, seemed to take on a different character, less prop, more weapon. "Honk, honk!" The sound exploded across the courtyard as Joey pressed the ball against Harrison's nose, the squeak echoing off the palace walls like a gunshot. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Physical contact with the Queen's Guard was strictly forbidden, a line that had just been deliberately and dramatically crossed. The veteran's wife's fingers dug into her husband's arm, both of them watching with the grim certainty of those who understood the gravity of what they were witnessing. Their faces showed not shock, but the patient recognition of those who knew that certain actions demanded certain responses. But Joey, either ignorant of or indifferent to the line he'd crossed, seemed emboldened by the guard's continued stillness. He launched into a series of increasingly aggressive moves, each one more deliberately provocative than the last. His oversized shoes scuffed against the courtyard stones as he performed an exaggerated military march, his movements a mockery of the precision and dignity the guard embodied. "Look at me. I'm a fancy guard," he declared in a falsetto voice. "I'm so important, standing here doing nothing." "Maybe we should do a proper inspection," Joey declared, reaching toward one of Harrison's polished brass buttons. "Make sure everything's up to standard, right?" His fingers never quite made contact, but the threat of touch hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Mike had stopped moving with his camera, now holding a fixed position that captured both men in frame. His professional detachment had cracked slightly, revealing uncertainty about what might happen next. He'd filmed many of Joey's performances, but something about this one felt different, more volatile, more likely to end in consequences. "Look at these medals," Joey continued, his voice taking on a mocking sing-song quality. "All shiny and pretty. Bet they give them out for best statue impression, right?" He leaned in closer, his painted face reflected in the gleaming brass. "Or maybe for longest time spent pretending to be important." The crowd had grown larger but quieter, the usual tourist chatter replaced by tense silence. Parents who had been amused by the initial clown act now held their children closer. A group of teenagers who had been recording on their phones slowly lowered them, sensing they were about to witness something that shouldn't be shared for entertainment. Joey reached into another pocket of his costume, this time with less theatrical flourish and more purposeful movement. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," his voice had lost some of its performer's lilt, replaced by something harder, more determined. "Since our friend here seems immune to traditional entertainment, maybe it's time we tried something a little more refreshing." The sound of water sloshing inside rubber made several onlookers step back. The afternoon sun caught something colourful in Joey's hands. Water balloons, their surfaces gleaming with malicious promise. The veteran couple moved forward slightly, but Joey's next words froze them in place. "Now, for my grand finale," he announced, weighing a balloon in his hand. "Let's see if we can't add a little colour to all this boring ceremony." The water balloon arced through the air with deliberate precision, its trajectory carrying years of schoolyard accuracy. Time seemed to slow as it approached Harrison's face, the afternoon sun catching the rubber surface and turning it into a projectile of gleaming intent. In that suspended moment, several things happened at once. A child's voice cried out in warning. The veteran couple took an instinctive step forward, and Mike's camera whirred with rapid focus adjustments. The impact was explosive. Water erupted across Harrison's face, drenching his bearskin cap and sending rivulets down his scarlet tunic. The carefully maintained uniform, pressed to perfection before dawn, now clung to his frame in dark patches. Water dripped from his medals, each drop striking the courtyard stones like accusations of disrespect. "Direct hit!" Joey crowed, already reaching for his next balloon. "Look, everyone! The statue's all washed up!" His painted face had contorted into something ugly, the performer's mask slipping to reveal the cruel satisfaction beneath. "Maybe now he'll show us a real reaction." The crowd's horror was palpable. A young girl burst into tears, burying her face in her mother's skirt. The veteran's wife had pressed her hand to her mouth, her husband's face darkening with the kind of anger that comes from witnessing deliberate disrespect to everything he'd served to protect. Harrison remained motionless, water streaming down his face, but something had changed in his bearing. Though his eyes still faced forward, they now held the cold focus of a soldier assessing a threat. Each drop that fell from his chin seemed to carry the weight of centuries of tradition, each splash against the stones a reminder of boundaries crossed. "What's wrong, soldier boy?" Joey taunted, tossing another balloon between his hands. "All that famous discipline getting a bit watered down." He played to the crowd, but his audience had transformed from spectators to witnesses. Even Mike had taken a step back, his camera still rolling but his free hand reaching for his phone, as if debating whether to call for help. Water continued to soak through Harrison's uniform, turning the scarlet darker in spreading patches. The bearskin cap, symbol of centuries of ceremonial dignity, now sat heavy and sodden on his head. Yet his posture remained perfect, each droplet that fell from his chin seeming to strengthen rather than weaken his resolve. "Ladies and gentlemen," Joey announced, his voice carrying a manic edge now, "I think our friend here needs another shower. After all," he hefted another balloon, testing its weight, "we wouldn't want him to stay half wet, would we?" The veteran finally spoke, his voice carrying the command of decades of military service. "That's enough, son. You've crossed a line." But Joey was beyond hearing reason, caught up in the momentum of his own malicious performance. "A line?" Joey laughed, the sound harsh and empty of humour. "The only line here is this toy soldier trying to pretend he's anything more than a tourist attraction." He drew back his arm, the second balloon ready to launch. "Let's see what other tricks our wet friend can..." The balloon never left his hand. A vice-like grip had clamped around his wrist, the pressure precise and professional. Joey found himself staring into the face of a man who, seconds ago, had been just another tourist in the crowd. But there was nothing tourist-like in his bearing now. This was palace security, trained and ready. "I believe," the officer said quietly, his grip never wavering, "that's quite enough entertainment for one day." His voice carried the kind of authority that needed no volume to command attention. Joey's other hand moved instinctively, still clutching his remaining balloons. But a second officer had materialized on his other side, this grip equally professional, equally immovable. Mike's camera captured it all. The sudden shift from aggressor to caught, the way Joey's painted smile froze, then cracked. The moment realization dawned that his performance had found its final audience. Water still dripped from Harrison's uniform, each drop marking time like a military drum. His eyes remained forward, but now they held something else. Not satisfaction at the intervention, but the patient certainty of one who knows justice will be served. "Well, well," the first officer said, his tone conversational but his grip unwavering. "It seems someone needs a lesson in respect for tradition." His free hand moved to his back pocket, the metallic click of handcuffs providing punctuation to his words. "And, as it happens, we have just the teaching method in mind." "Let go of me!" Joey struggled against the officer's grip, his clown shoes scuffing uselessly against the courtyard stones. "This is assault! I know my rights!" The painted smile on his face had become a grotesque smear, running slightly from the splashback of his own water balloon. "Rights?" The first officer's voice remained professionally calm as he secured the handcuffs. "Let's discuss rights. The right of a soldier to stand his post with dignity. The right of a uniform to be respected. The right of tradition to be preserved." Each word was punctuated by the ratcheting click of the cuffs tightening. "Those are the rights we're concerned with at the moment." The second officer had collected Joey's remaining water balloons, holding them with the careful attention of someone handling evidence. "Quite a collection you've got here," he observed, his tone deceptively casual. "Seems like you came well prepared to disrupt a military post." Mike had frozen in place, his camera still running, but his body language screaming internal debate about whether to intervene or retreat. The decision was made for him, as a third officer appeared at his side. "That's quite enough filming for today, sir," the officer said firmly, "though we'll be very interested in reviewing your footage." The crowd had reformed into a circle, but the atmosphere had shifted. Where before they had been an audience to a clown's performance, now they were witnesses to justice in progress. The veteran couple watched with grim satisfaction, their military bearing recognizing the professionalism of the security team's intervention. "You can't do this!" Joey's voice had lost its theatrical projection, now cracking with genuine alarm. "It was just a joke! Just entertainment!" His makeup was running now, not from water but from sweat, creating streaks that revealed the fear beneath the facade. The first officer turned him to face Harrison, who remained at his post, water still dripping from his uniform. "A joke?" The officer's voice carried deadly serious undertones. "Let's talk about jokes. That uniform you've just drenched, it represents centuries of service and sacrifice. Those medals you mocked, they're earned with blood and valor. That position you disrespected, it's a symbol of everything that allows you to walk freely through these gates." Joey tried to look away, but the officer's grip ensured he had to face the consequence of his actions. Each drop of water falling from Harrison's uniform seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "Now then," the second officer spoke up, weighing the confiscated water balloons in his hand. "What should we do with these? It seems a shame to waste such carefully planned entertainment." There was something in his voice that made Joey's painted face pale beneath its makeup. The first officer's professional demeanour cracked just enough to reveal a smile, not of humour, but of justice about to be served. "You know," he addressed the crowd, "I believe our friend here had the right idea. Sometimes a little refreshment is exactly what's needed to teach a lesson about respect." He raised his voice slightly, though he didn't need to. The crowd was hanging on his every word. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems our performer here wanted to put on a show. It would be discourteous of us to deny him his moment in the spotlight." He gestured to his colleague, who began distributing the remaining water balloons among the crowd. "Perhaps we could assist in demonstrating the consequences of disrespecting a royal guard." The veteran was the first to accept a balloon, weighing it with the same precision he'd once used to judge the weight of grenades. Other tourists followed suit, their faces showing understanding of the poetic justice about to unfold. Even some of the children who had initially laughed at Joey's antics now stood with their parents, small hands gripping balloons with solemn purpose. "Wait!" Joey's voice had lost all its previous bravado. "You can't! This isn't—" His oversized shoes scuffed against the ground as he tried to back away, but the officer's grip remained firm. "Oh, but we can," the first officer corrected him mildly. "You see, you wanted to demonstrate the power of water to break composure. Now you'll have the opportunity to experience it firsthand." He looked around at the assembled crowd, each person now armed with a piece of justice. "Shall we begin the lesson?" The first balloon caught Joey square in the chest, exploding with a satisfying splash that instantly soaked through his costume. The veteran's throw had been precise, military training evident in his accuracy. Joey's painted face registered shock. This wasn't how his performance was supposed to end. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officer announced, still maintaining his professional grip on Joey, "feel free to express your appreciation for his earlier entertainment." The crowd needed no further encouragement. Balloons arced through the air in a rainbow of retribution. Each impact washed away more of Joey's makeup, revealing the scared young man beneath the clown's facade. His rainbow wig hung limp and sodden, his oversized shoes squelching with each futile attempt to dodge. "Not so funny from this side, is it?" the second officer commented mildly, letting another balloon fly. Water streamed down Joey's face, carrying streaks of grease paint with it. His earlier bravado had dissolved completely, leaving only the comprehension of consequences in its wake. Through it all, Harrison maintained his post, water still dripping from his uniform. But those who looked closely might have caught the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but perhaps an acknowledgement that sometimes justice carries its own kind of satisfaction. The last balloon burst against Joey's back as the officers began to lead him away. His costume, now a dripping mess of colours and shame, hung heavy on his slumped shoulders. Mike had already been escorted out, his camera's footage destined to document a very different kind of performance than planned. "Let this be a lesson," the first officer addressed the dispersing crowd, though his words were clearly meant for more than just this audience. "The Queen's Guard stands for something greater than entertainment. Their discipline isn't weakness, it's strength. Their silence isn't an invitation for disrespect. It's a testament to honour, and sometimes," he glanced at Joey's drenched form, "those who mistake that strength for weakness need a refreshing reminder of the difference." As the officers led Joey away, Harrison remained at his post, as immovable as the traditions he protected. The water would dry, the uniform would be pressed again, and he would return tomorrow to stand guard. Because that's what duty demanded, not just guarding a palace, but standing firm for principles that no clown's antics could wash away. What would you have done if you witnessed such disrespect to a royal guard? How do you think we should handle those who mistake discipline for weakness, tradition for outdated ceremony? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like if you believe in respecting our servicemen and women, and subscribe for more stories about those who stand guard over not just places but principles. We'll see you in the next one.